Monday, February 28th. We are going to continue our unit on patrol. And the last class, we talked about kind of how patrol is allocated. We also talked about different styles of patrol, like service oriented, legalistic, watchman, reactive, and proactive. Today, we're going to talk about some certain studies that have taken place in regards to actual patrol, how police kind of measure up in regards to what they do on the street. And the first study we're going to get into is the Minneapolis Chicago study. And this is basically studying the call service workload. What does that mean? Just basically what police officers are responding to on a daily basis. So this study took place in 1997, and it is still pretty prevalent today in regards to really nothing has changed. In regards to actual crime, police officers respond to maybe 20 to 30% of all their calls related to an actual crime. So you're talking approximately 70 to 80% is for everything else, to restore order, order maintenance, service, peacekeeping, problem solving, disputes, you know, everything else, medical aids. So as you can see, more than likely, as a police officer, you're going to be responding to many more assignments that have nothing to do with actual criminal activity. But yet, policing, law enforcement's first duty is to prevent crime. So that's one of those things that we look at now in regards to broken windows, quality of life, order maintenance. What do you do? Do you just go after criminality, or do you have to work on other things in order to make people feel safe? And with 70 to 80% of all calls coming from something else other than crime, police officers have to be able to do other things in order to keep people safe. And in regards to violent crime, of the 20 and 30%, only 3% are related to like major crimes, violent crimes. Talking, the top seven FBI major index crimes like robbery and murder and, felony assault and burglary and stuff like that. So only 3% of that 20 to 30% is related to basically an actual major index crime. Most of your other crimes are the I guess 17 to 27% of police officers responding to are basically property related crimes. Um, Minor stolen property, damage to property, stuff like that, trespassing. So again, the majority of the time a police officer is going to be working. They will not be going to criminal activity. They will not be going to major criminal activity. And more times than not, it's a peacekeeping mission in regards to mediating people and trying to make sure that everyone feels safe. And in doing that, there's a lot of discretion placed on police officers in how to get that done. What's the best solution? One solution in one call might not be the same solution in another call. So there's a lot of things going on. And one other major factor that this actual study came down to is that the calls for service were not equal, meaning that the lower income residents, that lower income strata, were more likely to call the police than your upper or middle class in regards to needing services. Your lower income residents will reach out to police to solve their problems. One, because maybe they have more problems, or two, because they have nobody else to turn to, unlike upper class or middle class. Second study was the Police Foundation study, and this one is a little bit earlier. This one's 1977. This took place in Kansas City. And this study was in regards to response time and clearance rates. They tried to correlate whether the quicker the police officer responded to a location for a crime, would they end up clearing that? Now, clearance rates have their own definition depending upon what department you are talking to. But basically, what a clearance rate is either going to find out who committed the crime or actual arrests made in regards to that crime. So, what did this study find? Well, it actually found that a response time, the quicker a police officer got to a location in regards to a crime, it didn't affect any clearance rates. Meaning that if the officer took 5 minutes or if the officer took 1 minute, more than likely the person would be arrested anyway, or the person wouldn't have been arrested anyway. So it really didn't affect clearance rates. And what they did find is that there's four major factors in regards to responding. How do police officers get there? And those four factors were discovery, reporting, processing, and travel. Discovery is actually finding out the crime that actually happened, right? How long does that take? Does the person know it happened right then and there? Or maybe their house gets burglarized and they come back even a day later or hours later and they had absolutely no idea. So the discovery really kind of makes a big difference. The reporting goes from when I discovered to the time I actually called the police. There were many times that, I responded to a call of, let's say, a robbery, major crime. And I asked the person, well, when did this happen? And they'd say, oh, about 3 hours ago. I was walking home. I just came home. I got busy and, I figured I'd call you now. So I go, well, why did you wait? 3 hours is a long time. There's really not much other than taking a report. And honestly, more than likely, whether I got there probably within a minute or got there within 3 minutes, depending upon this person's discovery and knowledge of what happened, that's what's going to really depend upon whatever the clearance rate that happens. The only two things that are actually in the control of police departments in regards to responding to an actual location are the last two, and that's the processing and the travel to the location. Processing is obviously after they take the call, putting it in the computer, sending it out over, a dispatch communication line to the officer and giving them the assignment. That's the processing. Travel is obviously wherever the police officer is from point A. Now they got to travel to point B where the crime or the subject or the person actually is. So those are the only two things that are in control of the police department. They found that generally processing could take anywhere between 2 to 3 minutes, and travel on average is about 5.5 minutes. Now, the fact is that the travel is going to be dependent upon location. Is this a very urban location? Is it a suburban location? Is it rural? So depending upon where you are in the country, that travel time may expand somewhat. Here, we can see travel time being a little bit less. New York City, depending on how busy they are, it could be even lesser than that because of the amount of police officers they have. And, in your rural areas of America, middle America, that probably is going to be a little bit higher in regards to travel time. They found that 75% of all crimes that were reported to the police department happened in the past. And that's pretty much even still today. A lot of times when I responded to assignments, they were crimes that happened previous. They weren't in progress type crimes, or at least things that just happened. But they happened, 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, or, hours ago. So they did find that a lot of the crimes that happened in the past. But the one major factor, and again, this is perception, the public's perception. Again, they found response times did not affect clearance rates, but they did find that if the police department took too long to respond, the public was less satisfied with that department's response. And that's true. There have been, again, numerous times I've responded to a location. I just get a call and I respond within a couple of minutes. And the person says, "You took too long to get here." And I say, "Well, I just got the call about 2 minutes ago." And they said, "Well, I called 15 minutes ago." Again, if the department is busy and people are on other assignments, there's not much you can do about it. You only have so many personnel to answer so many radio runs, assignments, and that's all you could do. Some things that affected patrol time, discretionary time. Police officers do have a lot of discretionary time in regards to when they're not answering assignments. They could be going one place, they could be going another place in regards to patrolling. Arrests, like I said, things could be busy. You might have less police officers on the road now because arrests have taken police officers off the road. So now you have less officers responding for different calls and you're not able to get there. Another thing that happens sometimes is officers holding calls or evading duty. And what this is basically, working 8 hours, working 12 hours is a long time. And sometimes you got to eat, sometimes you got to go to the bathroom, sometimes you got to get gas for your patrol car, and you need that time. And what you would do is you would go to a call, you would finish up that assignment, and you would wait. You'd go do what you need to do, and then after you do, then you would say that you're available for another call. That's basically holding a call. And that again builds in more time of police officers not being available to answer other assignments. Our third study, which is probably the most important study that has really taken place, and really the first major study on policing, and that's the Kansas City Preventative Patrol Experiment. This was in 1972. And what this did is it basically tested patrol effectiveness. This study, again, in Kansas City, they must have really liked Kansas City back in the 70s. This would play around with the amount of police officers that were actually assigned to different sectors and were actually conducting patrol at a certain time. So what they would do is they would have a precinct and they would make sectors, they would make posts, however they did it. And what they would do is they'd put 3 police cars in one area. They'd put no police cars in another area. And then they would keep the same police cars in another area. So they would increase and decrease these areas of patrol and see how effective it was. They used criminal activity. Would crime go up? Would crime go down? Would crime stay the same? And they figured this out by using the Uniform Crime Report, the UCR, or a victimization survey. And at this time, the victimization survey was brand new. And you usually get these in regards to people getting sent to it or maybe even taking them in the hospitals. They take these surveys. So what they did is they wanted to see the perceptions of the community. They wanted to see the attitudes. Would they know what's going on? And then they also tested and looked at actual police officer behavior and the police department practices based upon this experimental nature in regards to increasing or decreasing the levels of patrol. What did they find? Well, they found that the levels of patrol had no significant impact on crime. Crime really didn't go up, crime really didn't go down in any of the areas that had an increase, decrease, or same level of patrol. They also found that it had no significant impact on citizens' feelings of safety. So the citizens, whether they saw more police or they saw less police, it didn't really significantly impact it. They also found that it didn't significantly change the behavior or lifestyle of the community in regards to any of the changes of police protection. They just basically went on with their lives. It also didn't affect the attitudes of the actual police department, of the police officers. They really just did the same exact thing. And the biggest thing is that the citizens didn't even notice the change in patrol levels. They had no knowledge or no significant idea that actually the levels of policing actually changed. So if they weren't told or weren't asked about it, they would have had no idea. Some of the reasons for it, well, if your police department doesn't have a lot of police officers and you double the number of police officers in a certain area, so let's say you have one police officer patrolling a certain area and now you make two police officers and you've doubled it, it's not really going to make that much of an impact in regards to what really is going to be going on. Now, if you move it from 1 to 15, that might be different. Right? Um, some of the crimes were not deterred, even with the increase of policing, because those crimes occurred inside. Burglaries occur inside. Drug dealing maybe inside. So those type of crimes aren't going to be deterred, no matter how many police officers you put really onto the street, because you're not able to see these crimes, assaults, domestics. You're not going to be able to deter these. Again, we talked about omnipresence, that residual deterrent, the omnipresence, the belief that police are always there no matter whether you see them or not. That continued. So even if you took police officers away, you decreased the level of patrol, you still had that deterrence going on because they still believed police officers were there. And the main problem with this study is they actually only tested the levels, the number of police officers that are out there. They did not test what they actually did on the street. Now, if all police officers in this department were completely reactive and did nothing else other than go to 911 calls, then you have it. But you may have officers who are then proactive, right? Those two different styles of policing. And one police officer being proactive are possibly equal to like three or four police officers being reactive. So the fact of the matter is because that was a major problem to this study. They didn't kind of test what the officers actually did. So if you decrease the level, but you had a very active police officer who was going out making stops, pulling cars over, patrolling all over the place, interviewing people, that could do more than just three officers just hanging around and doing nothing in an area. So that was a main thing that unfortunately this Kansas City Preventative Patrol experiment did not take into account. And our last one, very similar to the Kansas City Preventive Patrol. In fact, it was the same exact study about 10 years later, in 1981, done, except this one, instead of officers in patrol cars increasing and decreasing, what this did is it was actually the precursor of community policing. This is basically the study that moved us into the police community type of era of policing, the community policing era, is this study, Newark Foot Patrol, because all it did was deal with foot patrol instead of patrol cars. So it increased or decreased the level of patrol levels, but with officers on foot. This had a little different findings than the Kansas City Preventative Patrol. It did generally not affect crime. Again, there were still the same issues in regards to that. It didn't deter the crimes that were happening inside. But it did have a significant impact on the citizens' attitudes. The citizens were much more aware of the increase and decrease levels of patrol because they saw the police officers. They saw them on the streets, right? And then all of a sudden they didn't see them on the streets. So they absolutely see. Patrol car, come and goes. The officers on foot, though, are there, right? They're tangible. You don't touch the police officers, but you can reach out and talk to them and and be there. The one thing they did find, though, in relation to crime is that the severity, there wasn't a lot of major crimes. The major crimes, well, the actual number of crimes kind of stayed level. the major crimes decreased with the increase of foot patrol. So the more people you placed on foot, the diminishment of major index crimes. And also, again, another major difference between the Kansas City Preventative Patrol, where police officers' attitudes really didn't change. Officers' attitudes changed with the Newark Foot Patrol experiment. They felt a better attitude towards the public. Again, because they were able to mingle in there, they were able to speak with them. So the fact of the matter is that this experiment in early 1980s really paved the way for community policing. Those community policing units, the problem-oriented policing units, and in the mid 80s to the late 80s is when we really started to see community policing really take hold in uh, first in New York City and then really around the country. Now, we spoke about that call service workload experiment, and the major thing there is that, again, you weren't responding to crimes, you were responding to other things. And the majority of those other things is called order maintenance. And this is basically, not all, but basically what we call non-criminal activity, non-crime calls. Right? So this is the all-encompassing of what the police officer does 70 to 80% of all assignments they go to. Again, these are quality of life, nuisance type calls, and this more than likely is really where you get the satisfaction if you're able to solve these problems. And it's really the satisfaction more so than your crime fighting, your preventative crime type of role. And what are some of those order maintenance assignments? Well, I mean, we see it all the time. The first one, and that's traffic enforcement. Again, this is probably your most common type of order maintenance. Police officers driving around every single day, and every single day they're enforcing traffic, whether they're pulling people over or not. Because if someone sees them, they are absolutely going to, well, they shouldn't be going through red lights and stop signs or speeding once you see the police officers, or else you're probably going to get pulled over and then you get your enforcement. Maintaining social boundaries. Again, this is kind of really example. This is removing unwanted persons, people who are trespassing, people who are not allowed in locations, people just being told to move on or told not to go there. And you get this call a lot. You get a call for unwanted persons a lot, and you go there and you say, hey, you can't stay here, and people generally usually leave. Relieving unpleasant situations. Again, another major thing, arguments, disputes. You're going to do this a lot in police work. Many people have disagreements, and basically you get called to either figure it out, mediate it, but basically you're there to make sure nobody gets beat up or nobody gets assaulted. Because when it comes down to it, unless there's a criminal type of argument or dispute, you, again, like we talked about, have very little leeway in regards to, stopping or forcing someone to do something. Counterpunching. Counterpunching is basically diverting away from your own behavior. And you get this a lot of times in neighbors' disputes where one person is doing something wrong, but instead of them getting in trouble for their doing wrong, they're going to call on the other person, the other neighbor, and try to get them in trouble. So it's basically, yeah, well, I might be doing this, but this person's doing this. So you need to go and do this for that person. And again, it's basically, yeah, but what about the other guy? So you're diverting away from what you're doing to the other person. Obtain emergency services as needed. Again, these are medical aid cases, whether someone's sick, someone breaks their leg, someone needs to go to the hospital for whatever reason, even mental aids, emotionally disturbed persons. This can fall under this type of call. And lastly, as I said, more times than not, it's non-criminal calls, but you do have vice and public morals that kind of fall under order maintenance because they are quality of life. And these are very low-level criminal activities, generally low-level misdemeanors, if not violations. Public morals and vice generally is prostitution, pornography, liquor laws, um, uh, buying cigarettes, which will lead into your the secondary assignment for this. That will be due on Wednesday, and that's going to be looking at the Eric Garner case. You deal with homeless people. A lot of them sometimes are mentally ill, so you have to have a thing in regards to that. Are you going to remove them off the street? Or are you not going to remove them off the street? Usually, if it's 32 degrees or below, there is a law that allows you to forcibly take somebody. But do you really want to be fighting a homeless person in regards to trying to get them inside if they really don't want to go? And a lot of times, these individuals really don't want to go. Again, going back to a mentally ill, are they a victim? Are they not a victim? Did they commit a crime? Did they not commit a crime? So usually this type of assignment tends to be very long. Yeah, you have to stay on it in order to speak with the individual and make sure you try. So, and you basically only have a couple of avenues in regards to it. If the person committed a crime, well, then you have an arrest. If they did not commit a crime, well, you can take them to the hospital. One, if they're a danger to themselves or others, well, then you can forcibly take them to the hospital. If they're not a danger to themselves or others, then you cannot forcibly take them to the hospital. It would be their choice. So you have to really know and determine in regards to, are they a danger? Police officers in the past have definitely had a lack of training. And again, police officers are not psychologists, they're not psychiatrists, they're not social workers. But these individuals can become violent very quickly. And so, what we try to do is we try to give them, as I say here, psychiatric first aid, try to calm them down. And even if they're not a danger to themselves or others, we try to talk them into going to the hospital. And the majority of the time, we can talk them into going to the hospital to, just talk to someone, just try to get better. Another thing for order maintenance is juveniles. Again, usually your larger police departments have their own separate unit that deals with juveniles. You'll have a lot of contact with them. These are individuals under 18 years of age, and a lot of them do have negative attitudes towards police departments, towards police officers. And your choice is, are you going to do strict enforcement or are you going to try to do crime prevention? Again, you arrest somebody under the age of 18, yeah, you want to know something, a juvenile, really nothing's going to happen too much to them, but it's still an arrest. Things can come up in the future in regards. Like if, any of you guys want to become police officers, if you were arrested before as a juvenile, yeah, sure, it's going to get it off your arrest record, but it never really goes away. You're going to have to advise them. So, it could ruin, a person's future. So you have to kind of weigh that, and sometimes use discretion. And lastly, order maintenance also is domestic disputes. You have to always deal with the Family Court Act here in New York State. Other states also have their all family court laws. Many domestics go still unreported. The definitions in regards to who's family, who's not, has changed over the years. So, you can probably, depending upon where you are, assume that you would be going to at least one domestic incident every single tour. Whether that is just a verbal argument or whether it has to do with some type of violence. Unfortunately, families call the police on a number of occasions. So it's probably a rare tour that you would not go to a domestic type of dispute, especially if you work in a relatively bigger police department in regards to it. So, but that's pretty much it in regards to patrol and order maintenance and kind of how we determine in regards to um, we go. In regards to the Kansas City Preventive Patrol experiment, you hear a lot of politicians say, oh, we just need to hire more police. We just need to hire more police. The fact of the matter is that no matter how many police officers you have, and you can look at it, the Kansas City Patrol experiment, it it's about what you do with them. If they're just going to sit around and do nothing, then that's not really going to make any type of difference, no matter how many police officers you hire. They actually have to go and do something. That will change the attitudes. That will change what people notice. Uh, if you don't, it doesn't matter. You can't just throw police officers at a thing. They actually have to do something. So, all right, well, that will be it for lecture number 2 on our patrol unit. Our last unit that we're going to be going over will be the crime fighting, and we'll learn more about community policing. And we'll see everyone on Wednesday.